I'm going to move, that's not my horizon, so I'm going to move that up just a fraction. The other thing I like about working this way is because I've got like size. It's exactly the right proportions for me to work from, so it just makes it so much easier. So my darkest darks, I've literally just got a mishmash of mauves, blues, greens, and maybe I'll even add in a little bit of brown. And as I've done before, I am just going to map in. See how dark that is? I'm not going to use black, but that's a very, one of the darkest greens I can get. And laid over with this very dark blue. Look how dark that goes. But it still gives you some sort of chroma. And I'm going to put it in all over actually, because I can always lighten it up, but it's much harder to darken it once you've done it. And although you can't see purple in the painting, I am putting it in because it just gives us some warm tones in there. A bit more blue. And I just want to make sure that when I blend this, and I can just blend it with a sponge, or I think we'll use the wet blending technique, I want to make sure that I've got enough pastel on there to get into the paper. Now this continues down here, quite dark. Now this is my underpainting, so under this sunlight there is dark water. So much as it's horrifying to look at this, I want some of this to be very dark. See, there's a darker patch in here. I'm going to go in with a bit of blue on there. And I want this. Look what I've done. Because I drew my picture on my pastel mat, I've actually marked all the paper. Big mistake. So I will definitely be having to do the wet technique to make sure I can get colour into those lines. Oh, it's always good to see the mistakes that we make. Still, I want a bit darker here. It comes round. I'm still going to bring that down a little bit. Now for my trusty grappa. But if I don't have the wet technique, I can still blend perfectly well with my fingers. But I've put all these lines on here because look, where I drew my picture, I'm going to paint it in. So I want a soft, I'm not going to do it too wide, a soft brush, not too much liquid. I'd rather do little and often. But there we are, you can see how that gets rid of the lines a little bit easier. And I don't want it all one colour, so I'm going to try not to move backwards and forwards too much. It looks like it's one colour at the moment, but hopefully when it dries you'll see it's not. It's definitely mauve in there. And I have got some paper towels so I can keep wiping my brush. So any white spirit will do it, but don't use anything that's too sticky. Not sort of like sambuca or something. A pure white spirit like vodka or gin. I wouldn't waste my gin on a painting. Yeah, vodka, take it or leave it. Right, now that just looks like a big black mess, but you will find when it dries, you'll be able to see some colour differences in there. Do my green bit first. I've just left the horizon showing so I can see where it is. Painting around the outline of my boat now. And the reason I'm not doing a underpainting at the bottom is because this is so pale, it's actually a similar colour to the paper. So if I was working on dark paper, really dark paper, I probably would underpaint this with a pale blue. It's quite useful actually to use the paintbrush to map in some of that darker, those dark lines. So again, I'm going to paint this in with the darker colours first, and you can see if you look at the values on this side, it's really quite dark and very similar to the value of the water, but this blue gives it a nice break. So the very first colour I'm looking for I haven't got in my tub, which is a cool dark brown. Is that cool enough? We won't know until we try, will we? So I'm going to come in here. Dark along down here. And these are dark. So it's that kind of distinction between the water and the reflection in the bottom of the boat. It's not that easy to identify. Comes all the way down there. This is also quite dark in here, but it's not as dark, and it's definitely cool because it's kind of further back, if that makes sense. And you might use hard pastels for this actually. I've just got a few hanging around. So I've just picked up a selection because you don't know until you put them on the paper. See, that's much paler than it looks. I want something fairly dark. It's just a little bit more colour than the one I used earlier. I'm looking at this now and thinking, how on earth did I paint this much smaller? But I did, so. Now I've traced this, but that still doesn't look quite the right shape as this. But anyway, you can feel my pain as you're doing yours. So some of the other colours I didn't get are these richer, darker ones down here. But before I do that, I'm actually going to put some of this pale blue in, because that will allow me to judge the colours a little bit better. So down here we've got this sort of really soft kind of green. It goes a little bit greyy, but that's quite a bit more mauvey, that blue. And of course this is where the sun is reflecting. See, that's not quite dry, so I need to be a bit more careful there. And there's quite a nice green tinge to some of this. So I'm literally just laying in a few different colours. And if, as you know, if I get to the point where I don't like them, I take them out. There's something a bit darker in there as well. It's around the edge of the boat and over here. Right, so I'm not going to wet blend that. I'm going to use the sponge for this. See how that goes. And all I'm doing is pushing the pastel into the paper. Right, so let's have a think about these browns. This might be too rich. Yeah, I think I want something a bit more. It's a real rust, isn't it? Let's have a look. What do we have? Don't know what make that is, but I think I might use it. That's quite a good colour for the really bright bits. And I think I might do it. There we are, I've got a few. Let's have a play. very red. Okay. What you've actually got down here is this kind of, a bit of this greeny, browny colour. It's much lighter up there. Got a bit of dark at this edge. See, you could do this whole thing with pencils, but I think that would be a bit of a shame, really, because this is half the fun of seeing what happens when you play like this. This is very soft, this one. And what I want to try and do is blend them. You can see I can still see my lines. This is quite red, but if it's blended with that, it should give me the colour I'm after. So this is the really light here, and I might actually put that in so at least I know where it is, but I'm not going to use my lightest lights yet. But let's put that in so I know it's there. And this one. Okay. Right, so that looks like a nice mess at the moment. What you also find with reflections is they will always reflect darker underneath. The reflection's darker than what you see on the top. Right, so I'm going to have a really good attempt now to blend that and try and keep some semblance of the colours that I have. Some of this lovely orange. In fact, that's much more yellow, but it's this sort of colour up here. But we'll do a bit more with that in a little while. I'm going to use my sponges, and the reason I'm going to use my sponges is because I want to be able to paint over it fairly quickly. I've got water on that. So again, trying to go with the strokes direction of the planks in the boat. Okay, down here. I've tried to keep just some of these little darker bits in line so that I've got a guide, but I am going to lose pretty much all of them at some point. Don't know where that red's come from. still? Doesn't matter. Right, blend this up here. All of that. But it's looking a little bit like a boat, so I'm not going to grumble too much. I think this is dry enough now to do a bit of the background on. As you probably know, I like to get all of my colour on and then come back. In fact, we haven't got any on there. And then come back and do another layer and then another layer and build it up that way. So I'm going to go back and do some of this now. And you can see that we've got the underpainting nicely blended. There's still quite a bit of pastel on there, which is good, but you can probably see now it's dry. It does look like there's a little bit of light and shade in there, and I want all the attention to be here. So I don't want to draw too much attention to it. So at the moment, all I'm going to do is go in with the colours I used before, and just pick out some areas to lighten up or darken or that makes it look really nice and dark. And then when I come in with something a little bit lighter, I don't want anything too green. What I mean is too warm, because it will bring it forward a little bit too much. I just want kind of an impression of a little bit of light in the background. Nothing specific. It's literally where the light's catching some of the bushes. That's better. And then there will be slightly different green. It's still quite cool, but it just gives the illusion of a little bit of light again. So I am just literally working from dark to light as I go, getting gradually lighter each time. So nothing's too garish. Moving my pastel around so it's not making the same shapes everywhere. And that little bit of light actually comes down there a bit, and there's something a little bit lighter in here, just in a couple of places. I don't want too much. And I'm going to leave that and then come back to it later, because I may want a little bit more, I may want a little bit less, I'm not sure. If I want a little bit less, I'll just go back over it. But for the moment, you see that already pulled the eye, but for the moment I'm okay with that. Now back here we've got a little bit of it's like rock and beach and that sort of thing. So going in with some very non-specific brown, but there is some lights as well. Use it on its side and just draw it across, so there is a bit of a beach there. Okay, and up here looks, that's probably all I'm going to do back there. Now I've got all this dark here, and there still needs to be some more on there. I'm not convinced it's dry. So before I do that, I'm going to go and do a little bit more of my boat.